Roadhog is one of Overwatch's most iconic characters, but for years, he's had an identity crisis. Despite being a tank, he actually offers very little to support his teammates. And even after a highly anticipated rework, things haven't really changed. So the question is, can Roadhog be saved, or is he just a lost cause? Before we start talking about Hog, we need to thank ROG for sponsoring today's video. Here's Dimitri to talk all about their extended Black Friday deal.
All right, so before we get into the video, just a quick heads up that this year our friends over at ROG are having a banger Black Friday sale only on Amazon. We actually partnered with ROG for an upcoming Cracked that you have to check out. Colton and I got to build a tricked out PC to test out ROG's brand new state-of-the-art 540 hertz monitor. Now, that thing is a monster, but let me tell you, ROG's 300 hertz Strix XG27 AQMR is also very beastly. So if you're in the market for a gorgeous top-of-the-line 1440p display with a fast response IPS panel that produces eye-wateringly vibrant colors, make sure you head over to Amazon to check out this exclusive 15% off Black Friday sale. It is a sick monitor for an even sicker price, so be sure to check it out. Now back to the video.
All right, so over the last 2 weeks, we got to experience Roadhog's new rework. And although we don't know how it plays at the esport level, since it's currently dead, it does feel a bit underwhelming. But if you've only been tangentially following Overwatch over the last few years, you might be wondering, what the hell's wrong with Roadhog? I love that big guy. Well, to answer that, we need to go all the way back to the beginning. When Overwatch first came out, Roadhog was an instant classic. For starters, he was a hook character in an FPS game. He was directly inspired by the game's MOBA influences. But besides his massive hook, Hog was one of the more self-sustaining heroes in the game. He could heal himself, did a solid amount of damage, and didn't have to worry about any of those support-related skills. He was basically a DPS hero with more health for any of those players who didn't want to do any of that team shit. That made him a pretty damn good choice for open queue, and wasn't a terrible one for role queue either. Sure, there were more dynamic off-tanks you could choose, but it was nice knowing you had a teammate that could easily one-shot those squishies. You see, the core of Hog was his one-shot combo. Land a hook, and bam. Now, there has been a long conversation about one-shots in Overwatch. Sure, it's satisfying, but people generally agree it's not always great for the game, with some even going so far as to criticize Hanzo and Widow. Partially for that reason, Hog's combo was nerfed by adding a melee after the hook and shot. Things got harder for your boy when Ana came out. Her nade was brutal against Hog since it basically removed his ability to heal himself. And it pretty much stayed like this until Overwatch 2 came out along with Kiriko, since she could counter it with her own cleanse. This allowed Hog to do his combo in peace, and the two quickly became pretty meta. In this new 5v5 environment with only one tank, Hog could easily get rid of these squishy support and DPS heroes. Since there generally wasn't as much CC in the game anymore, he didn't have to worry about pesky shields blocking his hook. But this made him very annoying to play against. I mean, the most non-tank tank was now dominating the game. And this forced Blizzard to rethink their 5v5 situation. So they made a difficult decision to completely get rid of his one-shot combo. This was Hog's absolute worst state, and it sparked a lot of conversations about actually giving the guy a proper rework. And then after half a year, it finally happened. For starters, Hog now has the ability Pigpen, a disrupt that, actually provides value to the rest of the team. Next to that, Hog can now vape to his heart's content, meaning that his heal is no longer a cooldown, but on a resource meter. So if you get hit with something like Ana's nade, you just have to wait a second instead of through an entire cooldown. This greatly improves his survivability, which was absolutely needed. Unfortunately, it just doesn't feel like enough of a change. Pigpen is easily destroyed, has a long-ass cooldown, and Hog still doesn't have any damage mitigation for his teammates. All he can do is heal himself and survive, making him like a walking ult battery. He's a big f***er, so enemies just have to poke him to build their ult charges. On top of that, he still has no mobility, so there's zero opportunity for him to disrupt or dive the enemy team like Doomfist or Balkan. So he doesn't really feel like a tank outside of the fact that he's just an absolute unit. A tank is meant to create space, mitigate damage, and protect or peel for your teammates. Hog technically can do these things, just worse than every other tank in the game. As a result, Hog was almost immediately buffed again. And there are some improvements to his numbers, but we can run into the same issue where he basically just becomes a glorified DPS again, which is where we get to the issue of Hog's bigger identity crisis. One problem that Blizzard has always had with reworks is how do we change a hero without removing what makes them, them? Everyone knows that Roadhog is the guy with the hook. You remove that and he's not Roadhog anymore. Mind you, I don't think the hook is the problem, but you get my point. His abilities, as well as who he is as a character, are why people gravitated towards him in the first place. Blizzard doesn't want to give that up.
It's a rework of Hog's been in the game for 7 years. We don't want to piss off the Hog players by removing elements of his kit, although they have removed alternate fire, but they're not going to mess with Hook. I can see what they've done, and I think they've succeeded, but the problem is, I don't think this Hog really feels any different.
This is probably the reason Roadhog's rework is so underwhelming. Blizzard is scared to make drastic changes to his actual kit. For the longest time, Hog was either completely busted or absolute trash. And when he's good, no one's having fun, so Blizzard is forced to belittle him to a dumpster pick. But Roadhog's struggles go way beyond him and just shine a light on Overwatch 2's bigger issue with tanks. Because there's only one tank, counter picks are more apparent than ever. Every single tank in the game can be countered in a direct way. For example, you pick Rhine, so they choose Orisa to counter. Then you switch to Zarya, which counters Orisa, but then they just choose Rhine again that counters Zarya, and it just goes on forever. Unless you play in my rank where people are seemingly unaware or unwilling to switch their heroes mid-round. Roadhog just gets the most spotlight right now because he seems to have the most counters, which is where we get to the potential paths and questions for Blizzard. Now, outside of continuing to buff him as a band-aid solution, they can give him another rework if Blizzard wants to admit they have a problem on their hands. But what would that look like? And would fans be okay with fundamental changes to his kit? It's either that or we go back to 6v6, make him a DPS hero, or just live with the fact that some heroes are just never really going to fit in. I will say they did this to Tachanka, because he was like the shittiest character in Rainbow Six, but he was so iconic because he was shitty. Like there's the Lord Tachanka memes, big helmet, big gun, and the whole thing was his big gun, and they actually just got rid of it and gave him a grenade launcher instead. And it's funny because he was so bad, but then he became a little broken after that because he could, you know, remove so much space with the grenade launcher. But yeah, I mean, it worked, I guess, for him, but can they do the same with Roadhog? I don't know.